So we're live. Hello and welcome everyone. Welcome to, I think it's my 6th stream of the kind of series so far. I've got quite a few lined up, so we'll chat about who's coming up next. But tonight I get to speak to Mr. Martyn Coupland, so without further ado, I'm just going to add him. Martyn, good to see you. How are you doing?
Yeah, no, good to see you as well. Really good, thank you. Yeah, ironically today, just thinking about when it was the last time I spoke to you properly, and realised it's very nearly 2 years. So
yeah, it's been South Coast Summit, I think it was. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You been good since then?
Yeah, really good. It's I guess as you know, and I guess most people all know that are watching as well. It's you kind of get into something, you kind of forget about the periphery going on, and you lose track of time, lose track of what's happening, and yeah, and then the next thing rolls along, and you just carry on and you keep going. But yeah, you know, it's busy's good.
Yeah, busy is good. I think it's funny because everybody you speak to is busy. Nobody's quiet. Nobody's like, oh, we're not up to much. Everyone's got their head down, getting on with stuff, and really, really busy. So tonight you want to chat about leadership and communities. Is that right?
Yeah. I guess it's kind of
that and a few other things.
Kind of an odd one, I guess, to what most people want to talk about, which is tech stuff. But you know, I'm quite a big advocate of mental health and well-being and such. And you know, I don't mind admitting to being in some dark places myself over the years. And you know, sometimes I just think it's good to talk about you know, the position you're in and we're in, creating content, putting content out there, speaking, you know, what it's like, what kind of effort goes into it, how much time it takes.
Yeah, no, let's do that. That's an awesome topic. Let's do that. So, just before we dive into that, give everybody a little bit of rundown of who Martyn Coupland is for people who might not know who you are.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so yeah, I'm Martyn. So now a free-time Azure MVP as of last week. Thank you. In terms of what I do day to day, so at the moment I'm an application architect for Seven, who are based up not far from where you are, actually, up in Glasgow. And basically my role involves cloud native app architecture. So both from a development side and from a cloud native infrastructure side. So quite a varied role, lots to kind of do and build up there and so on and so forth. But yeah, really over the past 5 years or so, most of what I've been doing has been away from the traditional infrastructure and more back to engineering and development, which is sort of where my roots are, really, if you like.
You're a big DevOps guy as well, aren't you? You're into your DevOps quite a lot. I see a lot of DevOps blog posts and sessions and talks and stuff like that.
Yeah, you know, it's something that I accidentally fell into, ironically, quite a way back now. I wouldn't even like to guess how many years ago and that was, but it's kind of something that I fell into, and as I started to learn more and more about it, it kind of made sense to me straight away. You know, like it does for some people, other people it takes a little bit to learn. We've kind of gone through the cycles of stuff like that. And the next interesting challenge that we have in the DevOps space is that there's a lot of talk at the minute about DevOps being dead. And is it still worth exploring? So there's some interesting topic and some interesting conversations coming out of that as well, which is always nice to have. But I guess generally one of the reasons I really like talking about DevOps and the topics around it is there's no one way to do it. There's lots of different ways to do it. So it's really good to talk to customers, really good to talk to the community about what their experiences are, what's worked, what hasn't worked. And, you know, I kind of see my job in that field to be able to I guess, really pull those things in together. And really say, I've seen this done this way before, or absolutely this will work in this scenario based on what I've seen before. And I think that's what a lot of people probably struggle with, is that there is no real right or wrong answer.
Everywhere I've done DevOps, every company I've done DevOps has done it differently.
Exactly. And in technology, right, we're very used to it being black or white. It either works or it doesn't. So I guess it can be quite tricky to be able to go have a conversation with someone and say, well, it might work or it might not work.
Try this, try that. I always say just suck it and see, give it a try and see how you get on. There's my camera going all weird now. My camera's decided to not play it. It's not going to behave now, is it?
There we go.
Cool. Yeah. So DevOps is interesting. About 3 jobs ago, I worked with a manager who basically sat me down and said, if it doesn't run on your machine and you can't build and deploy it from your machine, well, I don't care if it runs in like tools and stuff like that. And I was like, and he's like, no, there's no but. It needs to deploy from your machine, and that's the best advice I think I ever got, because I see a lot of people relying on tools quite a lot, and then it's like, oh, get hubs down, we can't work, and I'm like, what? Like, it's kind of, we'll not go too much into that, but I always liked like being able to run PowerShell from your own machine and then putting the PowerShell into things like I think it was TeamCity back then.
Yeah,
so that was quite nice, but not everybody does it like that.
Exactly. It's a really good way to think about it, I think. And personally, from my experience, I think people get lost in the tools when it comes to DevOps. And I always like to, first conversation I always have about DevOps is, let's kind of forget the tooling for a second. And let's think about the culture of your organization, and a fancy way of saying, how do we get people to work better together, collaborate? How do we make sure people are talking to each other, those kind of things. But once we have that right, we can then look at the people in the organization and make sure we have the right skills. Then we can look at the processes, and then we can put tools on top. Because if you do the tooling first, especially before processes, you generally have the scenario where you have bad processes happening twice as fast because of the tooling. Whereas if you optimize your processes first and then put tooling on top, you have optimized processes running twice as fast. At least that's the idea.
Yeah, no, that's a really good way to think about it, because it's a bit like APIs. I always think if you build the API first, you can build the UI any way you want. It doesn't matter what UI you build, you're still calling the same API. It doesn't matter if it looks crap or it looks brilliant. If the APIs work, it works. So that's a really good way of putting DevOps. Yeah, cool. Right. So we're really going to go talk about, I want to ask you about leadership and community leadership. So what's your kind of challenges with the kind of stuff that you want to talk about tonight? What's the things that you see? What's difficult in your eyes? Because lots of things are really difficult. Creating content and stuff like that is really difficult.
I think certainly since the pandemic, I think creating unique, engaging content is a lot harder than it was 3 to 5 years ago. We were just chatting about this before we went on air. I, like many other people, were furloughed in the UK during the early stages of the pandemic, and I didn't know what to do, to be honest. So I started a podcast, and it went really well. Lots of people started very similar things: video feeds, training videos, all kinds of stuff, blog posts. So I think we're now in a scenario where creating unique content is quite difficult, and that presents its own challenges, as in you question yourself as to whether you should do it or not, because there's already hundreds of the same thing.
It's a good point.
That's one
people
thing.
That's one thing. People are always saying to me, I don't know if I should start a blog, because like loads of other people who are smarter than me have written it, and I'm like, I don't really care about other people's blogs. Like, I want to see yours, and I want to see your point of view. People don't get that. It's different opinions have different thoughts and different ideas. So it'd be boring if everybody blogged the same thing with the same idea.
I've always seen my blog as something for me, and I don't mean that in a selfish way, but when you're out in the field with customers and you're talking to different people about different things, it's a good way to document thoughts or things that have happened and be able to look back on them. It just happens to be really useful to other people as well. So, I've always thought of it about a reference point for me, almost like an expanded notebook, if you like, of electronic notes. But, some of that content other people happen to like reading as well.
No, exactly. The number of times where I've got a terrible memory, so I blog so that if I ever run into this problem, honestly, that was the number one reason why I started blogging. If I come into this problem again that I couldn't find the answer on Stack Overflow, I blogged it so I can always, and sometimes I've even forgotten that I've blogged it, and then I'm like, oh well, I've blogged it. I didn't realise I'd even done that, which is quite fun. So yeah, no, totally. Big believer on doing your own thing as well. You shouldn't really look at other people and say, I'm not going to blog because this person's done it. That's not the way to go.
Yeah, and I guess with that kind of consultancy mindset, right? Yes, someone else may have done it, but the scenario could be very different to yours. The parameters could be very different, which may mean the output's different. It may mean the output's exactly the same. Who knows? But I agree with you. It shouldn't be a reason for you not to do it just because someone else has already done it. Otherwise, I think the internet would be a pretty boring place if everyone said, "Oh no, that already exists. I'm not doing it."
Yeah. So, talk to me about your podcast. What was your podcast? What was the idea of the podcast? And did you have doubts about doing it? Did you have concerns about putting yourself out there, or did you just think, I'm going to do this? This will be good fun. What was your kind of thought process for doing that?
So I guess initially it was wanting to keep the mind active. Being on furlough was tricky because your account was effectively locked. You couldn't log onto a laptop. You couldn't do anything. Because there were rumours that the tax agency might come and audit the organisation, see if people were still logging on while you were furloughed and take the money off them, and all kinds of stuff. I don't think that ever happened to my knowledge, but at the time that's what was being spoken about. But yeah, it was around just trying to keep the mind active, and I guess having been someone that has done public speaking for some time, doing it didn't really bother me because it was just audio.
You've done it before.
I guess what was different going into the pandemic was doing all these user groups virtually, which is something we can kind of come to a bit later. But yeah, I mean, really for me, it was just about trying to, what did I want to learn when I was figuring out DevOps? And other people are probably still thinking the same thing. I had a quick search around, sure enough, people were still talking about the same kind of things that I was talking about when I first learned it. So what I tried to do was get a real mix of people on. That was actually quite difficult to do as a Microsoft guy, as someone that's done Azure since the day it was released. Because when it comes to DevOps, there's not a lot of content specifically about Microsoft and DevOps together. So at the time, I was also an ambassador with a DevOps Institute as well, who were technology agnostic and more about the softer skills. So I had some guests on from that community as well. You came on it as well, if I remember, and we had loads of different viewpoints. But one of the things that went down really well, which is kind of a spare of the moment thing before the first episode, was I decided to ask every single guest what DevOps meant to them. And I didn't get the same answer once.
No, I was going to say, you wouldn't get that.
30 guests that we had in the time. So
that's pretty cool.
It was quite, and the thing I wanted to highlight was that even in the community of SMEs, we don't have an agreement on what it means. It's something different to everyone depending on their experience. But I think, to be honest, it was good just to have a chat with people. I think everyone was
totally.
It was good to talk to people, a change of someone else rather than just your four walls at home. That was one aspect of it. Another one was trying to share some good knowledge with people. And I guess secondly, or I guess finally to that as well, it's a good way to give a platform to people who have not traditionally done any kind of speaking before, because you're not on video. It's a lot easier to talk to people who are a bit more nervous about stuff like that.
Definitely. Yeah, I find that even me, who kind of does workshops and stands up in front of people, I really struggle doing public speaking for whatever reason. I just doesn't really suit me. So sitting here in my house, in front of my laptop, and nobody sitting watching me is fine, weirdly. But standing up in front of an audience, I'll just start blathering a load of rubbish. I just don't know. I just do this thing where I start ranting. So you said you were like in charge of or you were kind of ambassador for the DevOps thing. How did that come about?
So the DevOps Institute are, I guess, an organisation. They provide learning and training courses and such like, but they have a global network of ambassadors who, I guess, as the name suggests, fly the flag for DevOps. And again, that was a tricky community to be part of as well, because most people were talking about AWS. Most people were talking about GCP, and there was only really me and someone else that were talking about it from an Azure perspective. But they do skill up events where they get ambassadors to do virtual presentation slots a day a month about a specific topic, and again, good group, much like the MVP community, very similar in very tight group of people, globally distributed, and always someone that knows something more than you do, which is as far as I'm concerned.
How do you go about making friends with people like that when they've got a different kind of background? Because I think that I always find that difficult. If I go to like a user group, I'll kind of speak to the people that I know, and I find it very difficult going up to somebody and speaking to people that I don't really know, especially if it was like I'm the Azure guy and they're the AWS and there's I would really struggle talking to people because I just wouldn't know what to speak about.
I guess the difference when it comes to something like DevOps is you do have common ground. It's just finding that common ground and taking the tech out of it almost. And having conversations about how you do process improvement, how do you do agile ceremonies like daily stand-ups or retros, those kind of things, and they're all technology agnostic, so it's kind of easy to talk about. But I guess when it comes to hobbies and interests, that's a difficult conversation to have with people in a different part of the world, or it might not be a fit to have an interest in the same thing you are. So that can be tricky as well.
So what other, have you led or been an ambassadors in any other kind of communities? What other things have you done? What sort of roles have you done there as well?
So I guess in terms of community-wise, I guess thanks to the MVP program, as you'll know, it kind of gets you the ability to do a lot more than you potentially otherwise would. So I do quite a lot locally in East Yorkshire, down here in England, with local schools and education.
Oh, even better. Well, nice. I didn't know you did that.
Yeah, and I think it's a gap that we have, to be honest, as an industry. We know we need
100%.
skilled people, but there is no way for them to learn the skills.
Not sure I understand why that is. Like, why is there a big gap and they're not doing anything about it? It seems a bit weird.
It is strange, and we have a local event called Tech Week Humber, which we're quite a deprived part of the country in a lot of ways. Hull, where I am, is usually bottom of the best places to live league table by some distance.
Glasgow must be quite close to that.
It's one of the cheapest places in the UK to live as well.
Okay.
So prospects are not great for people. I guess I would say it's probably fair to say. So the idea of going to schools and going to do things with colleges is to basically go there and say, hey, I still live here. I was brought and grown up here. Now I'm an MVP. I've got to do all of these really cool things, and I get to talk to people about the cool things that I've done. And here's some examples of the work that I've done that you might be familiar with. Which is kind of nice to go talk to those people and interact with them. And generally, you can then talk to them about, hey, you know, if you want to go in tech, you don't have to be a techie. You know, there's lots of different roles you can do.
Absolutely.
And then the next question is, how do we get more diversity in the industry as well? Which is, you know, I don't know the answer to that. So definitely don't ask the question, because I don't know the answer to that. But
what about? I've always thought about, when I was at school, right? When I was kind of thinking about what I was going to do next, leaving school, we used to get guidance teachers, right? And I would always say to them, well, what jobs pay well? And they'd be like, police, astronaut, and I'd be like, well, I'm not doing any of them because I'm not smart enough. So I honestly think if like me and you went into a school and we were talking about, to people who are thinking about the next, like, or the potential careers, if you told them what you could earn and what kind of things you did, I think that would appeal to a lot of children. Definitely.
It would, and that is a question that comes up generally so not particularly at college, but secondary school. Usually the question you get is, so how much do you earn? Yeah.
So that's what I would be asking if I was them, to be honest. But you're right. I mean, when I was at school, I definitely didn't have anything like that. Definitely not. I'd love to have known now. Even like when I think about other people that I know, and I think what careers they went down, they could have done what I'm doing, and probably done a little bit better than they're doing, because loads of my clever people at school, or clever pals, all wanted to be accountants or doctors, and they went to uni for like 5-6 years and then chucked it because they just hated doing things that long. Yeah, and they could have had a career in IT probably fairly easy because they were very smart people.
So I mean that's the other kind of myth as well, and that generally goes one of two ways, this conversation. So if I'm at secondary schools, I generally don't really care. But if I'm at colleges where they're trying to push them to university, because that's the route they want students to go down, it's really difficult for me to then say, well, I didn't go to university. never entertained the idea. Just wasn't for me.
Yeah. All the kids these days want to be YouTubers. That's the thing. Everybody's like, oh, all my kids watch YouTube constantly. They want to be YouTubers. And I'm like, yeah, well, yeah, even if you went back to school and showed them how to learn to code, you know, like there's like these coding games that people are quite popular. I think that might be the way to go.
I think there's lots we can do as an industry, to be honest. And as part of Tech Week Humber last year, we did a day that was an educators conference where we got teachers, student ambassadors, college principals, school head teachers, and technical organizations in a room. And, you know, we both did sessions. They talked to us about the challenges they have. We talked to them about the challenges we have, trying to find people that we want to hire in 5-10 years. And that there is a massive gap in what they learn, even at university, to, you know, what they actually are going to be doing when they get into a technical organization. The two are just not aligned.
Same when I was at uni. Same, yeah.
And I think what's really nice about that is what come out of it was the opportunity to go into some colleges and really kind of talk about what it's actually like to work in tech and what skills you need. And that it's not always about doing really well at the academic side of things, because there are soft skills that are really important in tech as well. You know, knowing how to troubleshoot and fact find, research, good comm skills, you know, they're all really important things, as well as technical skills. But I think you can teach people technical skills. It's harder to teach people soft skills.
Definitely. I honestly think, I think I've spoken about this before on a stream. Most conferences for me should have like getting started or soft skills tracks. I also think places like GitHub should be in schools, teaching everybody how to do their first pull request. Just something simple. Sit in front of a computer, become part of open source, and then that might, one or two people will be like, boom, this is what I want to do when I grow up.
Yeah.
It's got to be. I'm surprised the bigger players in the industry don't do something about it. Maybe they do, but I've certainly not seen it in the UK.
Yeah, so Microsoft do have a lot of materials. I went hunting for information and spoke to 3 or 4 people actually within both the UK and corporate Microsoft that were really helpful and pointed me to this page of resources that I bookmarked and was really good. It's where if you're a student with a .ac.uk domain, you can go get free Azure credits, you can take free exams, you can get a free GitHub account, all these kind of things.
All right, cool.
And it really surprised me, actually, pleasantly. But it did really surprise me that those kind of things were available. Because, I never had anything like that.
No. They obviously do exist, just need to try and find them. So, any notable successes or achievements that you would like to kind of talk about that you've done in your career in terms of community leadership or being ambassador? The school thing sounds awesome, though.
Yeah, so I get a lot of fulfillment from doing that, to be honest, because it feels like I'm making a difference to what people might want to do. Don't get me wrong, I love writing blogs, I love speaking at events and interacting with people that way, picking up their knowledge, sharing my knowledge. I love doing that, but there is something about the element of working with kids to influence what they might want to do in the future that is hugely fulfilling. So
see, that's the kind of thing that I like.
In kind of recent times, I would say that's one of the biggest things is overcoming that fear of talking to a classroom full of kids.
And how hard was that the first time you did it?
To be honest, the first time I just talked about games. They all play games.
Just to get them on your side.
Yeah, and I started it with who's played Minecraft, and everyone's hand went up. It's like, oh, well, when you play Minecraft, these people are involved. This is what they do. That's code.
A good idea.
And they can relate to it. And I think I got some good advice from a teacher who basically said, get down to their level and talk about stuff that they understand. Because the first time I did it, I think there were 7, 8-year-olds. I was petrified.
You think you're going to get stuff thrown at you?
Oh yeah. I thought they'd be there picking their noses, talking to each other, whatever else primary school children do.
It must have went well, though.
They were great. They loved it. They asked some really interesting questions. A couple of them that you're just like, I can't answer that. I don't know. But I guess that's the great thing about kids when you talk to them is that they don't know the limits of society like we do. So they have no boundaries in what they think about, and it gets you thinking.
Which is brilliant.
More recently, I loved doing that stuff from a community perspective. I think it's very different to what we all normally do as MVPs as well, and it kind of complements nicely doing this kind of stuff and speaking at events and that kind of thing.
I'm not sure that everyone realizes that MVPs get asked. No, they get. It's not act. What's the word we're trying to say? You can do this kind of thing a lot easier because there's opportunities to do this kind of thing as an MVP, which is really great. Lots of opportunities. What other opportunities have you done part of your MVP?
So way back in 2014, I got to speak at TechEd, North America and Europe, which was a bit of a highlight. It was quite early in my speaking career, I guess, if you want to put it that way. But it was interesting all the time. I was an SCCM SME back then, and Intune was just starting to be a thing. And kind of funny story there. The guy I was speaking with used to be the founder of the company I worked for, and we'd not prepared well, shall we say, for our session. And we got it all sorted. And then we went to go watch the keynote, and they basically announced these wholesale changes to Intune. Which made our whole session null and void, basically. So went to
obviously you had no idea.
No idea, like everyone else at the time, no idea. So I went to the speaker room for the next 3 hours, rewrote the deck and learnt the new stuff in 3 hours, and then went to go present it. Because we walked in a slightly different way to the room we were in, we didn't realise until we got there that because it was a real new thing in Intune at the time, all these new changes, they'd actually put us in the keynote hall in Houston.
Sugar.
So I just walked into this sea of chairs, and that's when it first hit me the first time.
Yeah. And how do you cope with that? Because that's the kind of thing, like, I've always said this, but when I'm doing workshops and stuff like that, before I'm walking up and down, I'm all right until I kind of get to the room, and then I put my laptop down, and then the nerves kick in. Does that happen to you still? Do the nerves still kick in?
Still does. Every single time.
How do you deal with it? Because I just struggle really. I just walk up and down and just keep pacing until it's time.
So I think I actually find it trickier to talk to smaller numbers.
Yeah,
more people. And I think so for example, that room in Houston was that big. We were on a stage and there were stage lights and you couldn't see past the first 2 rows anyway. You had no idea. I mean, I found out afterwards how many people had, checked into the session and stuff, which was scary in itself, but we'd done back then. But, so I did not then, but since then I have done public speaking courses. There are plenty of free ones online. I would say to anyone who thinks, I'm really nervous as well, how do you get over it? I think the key thing is just to remember you're there because you know what you're talking about. So for me, it's always imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I'm always okay. Yeah, same. I'm always okay 5 minutes in. Once I start talking, I'm fine. I actually like smaller crowds, and I would agree it's harder. But I like interactive sessions. I'm not a fan of just. I actually don't like going to conferences with big crowds because you can't ask questions.
Yeah,
I like to ask questions. I'm the annoying guy who always puts his hand up. Question. But you're right. Smaller crowds are a little bit harder because there's more people to possibly put their hand up and ask questions.
Yeah,
big crowds don't seem to do that.
I think when you have a smaller audience, this is going to sound really wrong, but when you do presenter training, they talk about controlling the room, and it's easier to do with more people. So when you're doing a workshop or you're doing a user group with less than 50 people, sometimes less than 25 people, it's really tricky, I think, to command the room because everyone can see you can see everyone. You have to separate the time you spend looking at every single person. You can't just sit on part of the room. Whereas you can do that if it's a really big room with lots of people. I think the other thing as well that really helps me is the layout of the slides. So I purposely keep the slides quite light if I'm presenting. And they are literally one-line bullet points, sometimes hopefully with pictures in. And I try not to stay on them for more than a minute. Which was something I learned. But like you kind of get going and the nerves go. But I always think it's like a band on tour when they don't get butterflies before they perform.
There's a problem.
That's the time to quit.
I've
always said the same about speaking and presenting. If I stop getting nervous, then something's wrong. Especially if I'm doing demos.
I mean, to be honest, the nerves of kind of even doing the streaming to begin with, I was like making this up as we go along. Absolutely, probably close the browser and everything will shut down at some point. But touch wood, it hasn't happened yet. But even when starting with you, I'm like, hopefully this will go all right. But then once you start talking, it just starts to flow. Advice for people keep always asking, what advice would you give new speakers? I think what you said there about finding free sessions online when you can learn public speaking is vital. But practice as well. I think a lot of people don't practice their content; they just kind of wing it. And some people can wing it, but a lot of people can't and try to wing it. And I think that's when you get caught out. I mean, we've all tried to wing it and then went, oh god, that didn't go too well. I think everybody's been caught out with that.
Yeah, no, I'm the same. I like to be prepared, is my thing. I find I'm less nervous the more prepared I am.
Same. I always like to. The other thing is I always try and present on stuff I know rather than stuff I think I know. Sometimes I'll try and do a talk on something that I'm like, I know a lot about, and then people start asking you questions, and then you can get into trouble.
Yeah, you can do,
So what strategy would you use to try and motivate and inspire people to actively participate in kind of these things that you're talking about doing, these communities? How do you get people to to be inspired and motivated? Because I always think that's quite difficult.
It is. As much as we've just said about speaking to smaller groups is harder. Start small. Because as a speaker, you're not going to get in a large conference with little or no speaking experience. So it's a vicious cycle of, I want to do public speaking, but you need experience to be accepted a lot of the time.
That's a good point. Yeah, let's talk about that, actually. That's a very good point. How do you get that experience in your view then? What would you do? Speak local?
Speak local. Yeah, I mean, I still am a member of 2 or 3, pretty decent local user groups. I don't know, we get less than 50 people turn up usually because people can't make it and have other commitments one thing or another. But I think pick a friendly environment as well.
Yeah.
Your colleagues, if you get the opportunity to present at work and do
I think that's the easiest start.
Lunch and learn session with your colleagues and present something that they don't know that you do. That's a good way to do it because
100%.
Don't want to scare people, but because they know you, they will be brutally honest with feedback. But because you know them, you will take it. Whereas I actually find it harder to take from a stranger when they come up to you and say, "Oh, that was really, really good. Can you tell me more about?" Or when I've written a couple of books, and when people come up at a conference that you've spoken at near it and ask you to sign it, I can't stand that. I don't like people talking about me. I don't like attention, anything like that.
Oh, attention, I would be the same.
Kind of gingerly say, "Yeah, of course I will, no problem." And then you kind of get talking, and it's all right. It's all right after that. But people talking about me as in, I don't think that guy's very good, or he doesn't know what he's talking about. It doesn't bother me, to be honest. It used to, but it doesn't bother me. At the end of the day, I present on topics that I'm comfortable with, like you say, and that I know about, so that helps as well. But I guess, my ultimate advice would be to try and start small local groups, then try and do stuff remotely, get a mix of different delivery styles, do an online course as well. There's loads that are free. There's an MIT one as well, actually, that's really good. I think it's a couple of $100, but you get a tutor, and you can present to the tutor.
That's good.
And they'll give you a critique and feedback and stuff. I've not done it, but I know some people that have and say it's really, really good.
I find it difficult standing up without footering. Like, I can't stand. I put my hands in my pockets and I just look awkward, and I can't. I just always like that. I really find it difficult to stand there still, like you're doing now, and look like you're presenting. I'm like doing all sorts. I'm walking up and down and stuff. I'm terrible at that. I like to.
It
when
takes
I do
a lot of getting
workshops,
used to.
do a workshop. I'm behind the lectern, kind of. Oh, look at this! Don't look at me. Look at this.
I think one of the best pieces of advice I ever got on one of the courses I did, that was a company paid for course, actually. It was really good. But I remember some of the advice on there. It was, try and do something with your hands, but not too much. Like, I'm doing it now because it's now kind of just ingrained in me. Try and sell what you're talking about with your hands, and try not to stay still. Try and walk around a little bit so people follow you around.
That helps me with the nerves, walking up and down. Not like walking up and down crazy, but definitely moving. Standing still is a lot, but not the best. Lightning talks as well. Small 15-minute lightning talks is quite useful to get started.
It is, because lightning talks are good because you don't always have the opportunity to go too in depth with stuff, and I think knowing how deep to go is also an art form that you get with experience. And this is not people won't know the subject, so don't go deep, so do a lightning talk. It's you have to stay high level. And it helps you practice delivery, it helps you practice time and everything. And I think everyone's number one enemy that I've always met is getting everything done on time. You have 45 minutes for a session. It's delivering 35 minutes of content, 10 minutes of questions.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think that's key. A lot of people don't time their sessions.
No.
And don't realise that when you're actually speaking at a big conference, you have to get in, get your laptop set up, and go, and you have to finish on time. So always leave a gap at the end for questions, but you need to make sure that you're out so the next person can in. And that's quite tricky because a lot of people who don't practice their talk don't know how long they're going to take. They go off piste a little bit and then they end up taking, and they don't finish. I see a lot of people don't ever finish their slides.
Yeah. Oh, you end up trying to ram it in at the end as well, which is also not a great thing to do. You end up talking really fast. Best advice I've ever got on demos as well. You know, we've all been there with demos, whether I've seen demos fail or my demos have failed. We've all been there. They work a million times before you get into the room. They work a million times after, but they do it that one time. I got bent by that at Future Decoded one year where I had a demo that I used to run with customers, other community groups, and it always worked great. But this day it didn't work for whatever reason. Still don't know why. And after that,
not fun.
Well, no. After that, I decided that any kind of mid-sized conference upwards, I would pre-record the demo and then just voice over it while I'm press play or embed it into a slide so it starts, and then go to the lectern so it looks like you're at the mouse and talk over it as it's doing stuff. And you can practice talking over it as you're recording it to make sure you leave enough room where you want to talk about things or highlight different things. And a lot of people might see that as cheating, but actually it's a much better experience for people that are attending.
Definitely.
Because then you're not fumbling around going, oh, what's happening here? Let's start debugging. It's the last thing that I want to be doing, and it's the last thing attendees want to see.
Well, I'll tell you a funny story. Well, it's not a funny story, but we went to NDC London. I think it was the first time it was on. And I don't want to name the person, but this guy came over from America to do a talk. I think it was on like one of the JavaScript frameworks, React or something like that. And he puts his laptop up, and he had about 50 people in the room. Pulls his laptop up, plugs it in. He's all good. Blue screen of death. That was it. Wouldn't come back up. So he's like, don't worry, I've got another laptop. I come prepared. So he does the exact same thing. Pulls the laptop out. He's like, I've got all the slides. I'm all prepared for this. Boom, blue screen of death again on his second laptop. And I was like,
unlucky.
And literally that was the end of the session. And he was absolutely gutted because he's flown all the way from America. There's not much you could do about that. I just felt so bad for the guy, but it happens to the best of us.
It does, and the really big conferences, a lot of the demos are ghost demos, so they're either recorded like I talk about, or they're just then, or someone else is running the demo backstage while you're talking over it.
Indeed.
How
do you measure success in some of these events that you're doing?
So I think
with the initiatives.
With the smaller ones, I think it's difficult because there's no direct speaker feedback or anything like that.
Proper feedback.
Some of the larger events, I'm sure people will know that, you're asked to fill in feedback about the session that you go to and rate it. And as a speaker, we can see all those comments and we get an average rating, and we all vie to be in the top 10 or top 5 for your track. And, then we can go home happy kind of thing. But the smaller stuff for me, it's about engagement, and that kind of follows on from, I guess, some of the principles of the MVP program. It's kind of less about talking to 10,000 people. It's more about engaging with 20 and continually engaging with new people and making sure that you're following up with them. And, if you say to them, can I take it offline and get back to you? You need to make sure you're doing stuff like that. But I think, proper engagement with people is how I measure it, and I guess secondly, if I get invited back as well.
Well, that's always a good one. Yep. Okay, so moving on. What's next for you then? Have you got any conferences up? You got any books on the go? You doing any courses? Anything you can talk about that you're doing, or you just started a new job and head down on that?
Yeah. So I've been in this role, I guess 3, maybe 4 weeks now. So. Just trying to get heads down with that and get on with what needs to be done. It's also conference season. We're well in the midst of conference season now, so the call for papers are in. I've heard back from some of them, and some of them being accepted, some of them have not. It's kind of just how it goes.
Of course. Yeah.
So there's a good mix of stuff coming up and some new audiences, hopefully, in some of those, which I'm
Nice.
excited to speak at as well. It's a different experience.
Bit of traveling as well.
Yeah, there's some travel with some of those as well. So
Good.
it's kind of good because I quite like the traveling aspect of the job as well. So we'll see how those go. But yeah, new audience, I think for me is always a good thing as well, and some of it's brand new content as well that I've been working on.
Cool.
I try not to recycle the same stuff too much.
Yeah, I have a bit of a bugbear about that. I see people, and this sounds terrible, but I see people doing the same talk for like 4 years, and I'm just like, I don't. I mean, hats off to them for doing that, and they get to travel around the world and give these talks. So I just couldn't do that. I would get bored. I would 5 times, and I'm bored of doing the same thing, the same talk.
Yeah, I generally think of the speaking circuit as seasons, I guess, and I'll try and do the same sort of stuff for maybe 1 or 2 seasons, and because you can update the content as well. That's the great thing about what we do as well, is it's always being improved. But then after that, I'll kind of keep it on the backlog, as it were, and try and work on some new stuff.
So I quite like asking everybody this question. There's a concept of the North Star, right? You have a North Star, which is like your end goal of what you would really like to do. Sometimes it's unachievable because it's just that thing. What have you got? Anything like that? Have you got any? What have you got? Any North Star, or do you think about goals and stuff like that? What's your like top goal, or do you not bother with that stuff?
So I do try and think about goals. I try not to put too much emphasis on them, to be honest, because firstly, I guess as an industry we evolve very quickly, so stuff can change, quarterly, if not monthly.
Mention AI, and totally.
So and that's something that could scupper you, 3/4 of the way to a goal. So I try not to. I guess I'm always trying to improve myself as a person, better understand me and better understand how I can be better at what I'm doing and how I can help others. But I mean, kind of career goals wise, I've obviously been in this same kind of role and leadership roles now for a few years. So, I think from a career perspective, it's time to kind of finish off knuckling down on this layer and then, hopefully end up in a senior leadership role at some point in the future. I've not put a time frame on that though.
Yeah. Okay.
But cool. That's kind of where I want to be heading, I think.
Cool. So recently you've been renewed as an MVP in Azure, is that right?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
The third time. Were you hopeful, or were you nervous, or did you think, I think you've probably done enough? Or I always ask people, what's your thoughts on like the day you're getting re-awarded or potentially not getting re-awarded?
I guess, I think last year, I think I was more bothered because I didn't want to be a one and out.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And I tried my hardest to make sure that I'd done enough valuable stuff to stay in, and I did a lot of stuff last year as well. I was less bothered about it this year, but I think the thing that got to me most about it was not so much do I get renewed, do I don't get renewed, because as great as it is to be an MVP and the opportunities it gives me, it's not something that defines me in my career or as a person. So I see quite a lot of people get really nervous about it and a bit do or die living up to the day, but reading that kind of stuff makes me more nervous, so I try and stay away from it for a little bit, to be
That's why I asked you that. Reading all that, I'm like, well, calm down, people. It's like, stop. Yeah, I was getting nervous reading about other people.
But I mean, it's a great community, I guess, and that's kind of another side to what we do that people maybe don't see is as speakers and content creators. A lot of us know each other, and a lot of us are friends as well. So, there's another side. Not in, not lucky enough to be in that group of people. That we get to socialize at events with the people that we know from the backstage side of it as well. But is the honest answer, but you never know at the end of the day.
No, I know.
What's
I
going to
did see a
happen.
couple of people who didn't get renewed who thought they would, which was that must be sore. I noticed you weren't at the MVP summit. Was that were you busy? Did you have stuff on, or did you just not fancy it?
Yeah, I mean it's just timing, to be honest. If I could have gone, I would have gone, but just not a great time this year. So hopefully next year get to go as well. It's definitely one of those bucket list things I'd like to do.
I mean, I've said this a few times. I went to Ignite, wasn't really a big fan of Ignite. Went to MVP Summit, didn't have high hopes, but thought it was brilliant. I mean, I got to meet people like Vickerson and all the people who I chat to who I've never met in real life, so that was awesome. Even getting the campuses, I was talking to Izzy about this. The size of the campus is like the size of the place that I live in, the town that I live in. I mean, we were getting taxis between buildings 30 to 35, right? Yeah. So it was like to get a taxi going from 30, and it was like there's another 110 buildings somewhere. It's just like
a city, isn't it? The whole campus is
like a full city. Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. Any holiday? Well, what do you do? What do you do when you're not working? What do you do to relax and stuff like that? What's your hobbies? Have you got any hobbies that?
So yes, I play quite a lot of music. I play guitar, so and all that kind of stuff's in the office I'm in now, which is detached from the house. So cool. Go up to a degree. So yeah, I love doing that and love getting to play that as well. Kind of outside of the tech scene, I have a real good group of friends as well that I'm lucky enough to have around and have stayed around the city for a long time. So, still get to spend some time and talk to them and those kind of things, which is always really, really good. And yeah, I actually quite like DIY, sadly.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
I wish I was good at DIY. I don't wish I liked it. I wish I was good at it. I'm terrible at DIY. I'm the last person who wants doing stuff. Like my mom was like that the other day. Can you come and do something? And I was like, you don't want me to be doing stuff.
Yeah.
What about holidays? Do you have any holidays
planned? Yeah, I do. I do like holidays. So the May half term that we've just had in the UK, a week that they get off for the end of May. Went to the Norwegian fjord for a week, which was
nice.
Stunning. Actually, never been there before.
Oh, really? Good.
Absolutely stunning.
Recommend it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Just once you get past the shock of the price of everything,
that's the reason why I don't go to NDC Oslo. The price of a pint. It's just like what?
Yeah. So funny story actually. We was out there and got a couple of coffees and. The Norwegian krone is an odd currency because the numbers involved are so large. It's hard to stand there and work it out really fast what it's actually costing you.
Yeah.
So you just pay it. You go sit down and then you sit down and you pump it into xe.com and you realise how much you've spent for 2 coffees.
How much for 2 coffees?
£15.
Oh my goodness.
So
I went with a colleague.
Like $25 maybe, $25.
Yeah, I went with a colleague to Denmark and we were working. I was heading to the airport. He's like, "Mum, we'll go for a quick pint." And we were in the centre of Denmark, and I was like, in Copenhagen. He's like, I was like, okay. But he's like, I'll pay. And I was like, right, okay. You're probably going to regret this. It was like 2 pints and a Coke was €34.
Oh.
And he's sitting there going, what? And I was like, told you.
Well, you said you were paying, so.
Yeah, exactly. And he was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, won't be doing that again.
Yeah, these places. So you enjoyed the Nordic fjords? Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely loved it. The scenery was out of this world. I've been quite lucky to see some great things traveling with work or, traveling on vacations and stuff. But that was another level type of natural beauty. Everywhere we went was, it was absolutely amazing. And then off away. What is it? 4 weeks, I think. Just over 4 weeks around the Western Mediterranean for a couple of weeks.
Nice.
Off to lots of different places on that. So hopefully it cools down.
Yeah, because I see it's like 45 in some places. Yeah,
it's a nice chilly 45 degrees Celsius. And
the world's coming to like crazy temperatures. Yeah. All right, cool. So if people want to reach out to you and get in touch, I have a couple of websites. So we've got, I had your Twitter, but I seem to have misplaced that. Let me just dig that out in a wee second. So that's your blog. I see you're blogging at, what do you call it? You're blogging at Medium. How's that working out?
Yeah, nice. I get a lot of interaction from the platform itself.
Oh, really?
You can look at that on the stats as well. So, I can see people that are coming in through me sharing a link on socials or coming in from outside the platform. But I guess a lot like WordPress.com, you write it, list it on the platform, and people can find it through a little post. Kind of similar on Medium. To be honest, I dabbled around with a few things for a while, and Medium was what I settled on. In terms of what's free, it's really decent. If I was willing to pay for something, then I would go with something like Ghost, which is quite similar.
Yeah, I've seen Sarah using Ghost, and it looks really nice. Yeah. So your LinkedIn is that. So people can reach out to you on LinkedIn as well.
Yeah,
I did find your Twitter. Yeah, there's your Twitter there. I've eventually dug it out.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, thank you for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. Hopefully, I'll see you in person at some point. I don't know when that'll be. I'm trying to think when that might be. You got any UK conferences coming up?
Potentially, but to be honest, I'm more likely to be up Glasgow way for work at some point.
I forgot.
So
if you're in Glasgow, give me a shout and
out.
I'll take you out for a drink. Yeah, we'll go out for a drink if you're up. Let me know when you're coming up. Yeah, because our user group's in the same sort of area, like just 2 doors down, basically from where your offices are.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're near George Square, is that right?
Montrose Street.
Yeah, that's so our user group, the Glasgow Azure user group's like 2 doors down, so I can find you quite easily.
Perfect.
Go for a drink. Right, Martyn, thank you for your time. Thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it, and good luck with all your sessions coming up.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Cool. Thanks a lot.